Let's continue to have our voices be heard while lifting each other up. For all of you here today, I'm going to want to remind you one more time to take out your phones at some point and text BRAIN to 444-999 to show your support for improving our mental health and addiction systems. Let's show policymakers that there is a united front to make change. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for this evening, someone kind of close to me, my husband, Marty Parrish.
I was 17 years old when I first experienced a debilitating episode of major depression. It lasted for several months, but for the first 3 days I could not even get out of bed. The covers were so heavy, and I felt so weighed down as if hundreds of pounds were laying on top of me. At times, I couldn't even get myself out of bed to go to the bathroom. And some days I felt like I wouldn't even be able to breathe because it just took so much effort and energy. And since then, I've experienced many more episodes of major and even clinical depression. And I've responded to depression, and the way that I've responded to depression had a lot to do with the way that I was raised. And even today, some of those very issues and criticisms that I faced in responding to my depressive episodes are still part of our public dialogue. I began life in a fairly typical American family in 1963. My dad was a Baptist evangelist and pastor. My mother was a homemaker and preacher's wife. My older sister in this picture in the middle was born with Down syndrome. My younger sister suffers today from multiple sclerosis. We have no problem recognizing that those two conditions have biological basis. But many people today still refuse to accept that there is a biological basis for depression and mental illness. I never had the courage to tell anyone when I was 17 that I was depressed. In fact, I didn't even really understand it. And for those with whom I did share my suffering, they would come back to me with platitudes or tell me that all I needed to do was pray and believe. Fortunately for me, I read a book in 1982 that was written by Dr. John White, a Christian physician. It's called The Mask of Melancholy. A Christian physician looks at suicide and depression. And what I learned in that book is that even though God may have created us humans, we're not perfect. But God gave us the ability to examine ourselves and bring about healing. I learned that there were chemicals, neurotransmitters in my brain that may not be working properly, that my brain dysfunction may be causing my depression, not my lack of faith. My parents divorced when I was 9 years old. My older sister there in the center died when I was 12. I suffered significant neglect, abuse, chaos, and dysfunction in my family following those years. In fact, by the time I graduated high school, or junior high rather, I probably would have scored an 8 out of 9 on the Adverse Childhood Experience score, the ACEs score. However, I was blessed with a high IQ. I was winning science fairs, making straight A's, starting on my football team, setting personal records in pole vaulting, and I was a cadet commander in the Civil Air Patrol. And in fact, I had been elected student government president in the 10th grade. But all of this came crashing down when I had that enormous, crushing black episode of depression. And as I said, I didn't seek help for that first bout of depression. I had a second bout about a year later. I lost 45 pounds in just 30 days, going from 175 to 135 pounds. I didn't seek help on my third episode of major depression, a 6-month-long bout that caused me to drop out of my master's studies in political science at George Washington University in D.C. I couldn't get out of bed to go to class, so I couldn't finish. I was trying to win depression with spiritual warfare, and then I thought I would also try a little spirit warfare. And the spirit I began to lean on was a big old glass of rum with a little Diet Coke for coloring. So by 1987, though, I realized that I had a serious problem. I woke up one Sunday morning and I needed 4 shots of that rum so that I could join my family at church. After church that Sunday, I finally took myself to an urgent care clinic. I was seen by a doctor who had some experience dealing with depression, and for the first time, I received a diagnosis. I had anxious depression, as it was called at that time, and the first treatment I had was one of our first generation antidepressants. And despite the serious side effects of that medication that eventually caused me to stop taking it, it did perform a miracle. It was like turning a light on in a dark room. It raised and alleviated that depression. And from that point on, I realized that there was hope, that there was a possibility of not always having to be depressed. After my father died in 1993, I started a business that became very successful almost overnight. My depression was somewhat stable. I didn't have as many lengthy periods of lows. But I was somewhat erratic taking medications because, for the most part, not all of them worked. Not all of them worked well. Doctor wants to change and try something different and see if it works better. And there's always side effects. And I always knew I could turn to that spirit of choice whenever I needed to. However, during this period, on a business and financial front, I was on top of the world. I had written a computer-based tax training program that was used by the Internal Revenue Service for 5 years by over 70,000 people a year. I owned a company that became, by the year 2000, the 5th largest independent electronic filing tax company in the country. I had 485 employees in 3 states. And I decided then to sell my company to Descendant, which was Fortune 500, and owned Jackson Hewitt at the time. And I thought, I can become a gentleman farmer on my 100-acre property, 10,000 square foot house, 18-acre lake, swimming pool, airstrip, and a hangar with airplanes to fly around the property. But my dream was not to be. In August of 2000, I entered outpatient treatment for clinical depression. When I came out, my wife at the time told me that she refused to be married to somebody who suffered from depression. She filed for divorce. And in the divorce, she managed to take much of the proceeds that I had earned from the sale of my business, just leaving me in shock and dismay. Eventually, I had to sell all of my possessions. I became homeless. I spent several years without a place to call my own, except maybe for my vehicle or a couch at a friend or family's house. I worked some as a business, tax, or an IT consultant, but I didn't work often. By 2003, I had lost everything. I was self-medicating with alcohol because I had no insurance and I couldn't afford to go to the doctor and buy medication. If I did get medication from a free county clinic, I would take it only until the side effects became unbearable. But, and this is real important, because of the amount of alcohol that I was consuming at the time, no antidepressant medication was going to be effective, but I didn't care. It seemed to me this was the beginning of the end, and my choice to use alcohol got me into legal trouble. I fell behind on child support. I was unable to hold down a job. I reached a point that I no longer cared what happened to me. Problem is, I had a son, and I had to care what happened to him. And for me to be able to care about my son and take care of him as he should have been taken care of, I had to first take care of myself. By 2007, I knew that I had to leave Arkansas, which is where, if you listen to my accent, you know it's not from around here. I spent much of my life there. There were no opportunities for me there anymore. I felt like I was either going to end up dead or in prison. And I recalled a gentleman I met back in 1984 when I was a student government council president at the University of Michigan at the Flint campus. and also whom I met quite a few times in D.C. This person decided to run for president of the United States. And I thought, man, I'm just going to change and go up there and see if there's not something different. So I left Arkansas and came to Iowa to work for a presidential candidate. My friends down there thought that I was a little bit loose in the noggin, and they were skeptical. But I felt I had nothing to lose. During the 7 months that I worked with then Senator Joe Biden in 2007 and 2008, I never let on about my mental illness. After being put on staff and beginning to earn a paycheck, I had insurance coverage and I sought legitimate treatment, and I began to curtail the use of my spirit medication, my rum. Now, we all know how Mr. Biden fared in 2008 in the caucus. I happened to be the guy sitting in the office getting all the reports from all the caucus sites. So needless to say, I was crushed. And even though I was on antidepressants, even though I was not drinking a lot of alcohol at that time, I fell into a very serious chronic state of depression that lasted several months. But one thing was different at the beginning of 2008 that was different than any other time in my life, and that was that I had a supporter who wanted to see me get better and who was willing to walk with me and walk the walk as I made the effort to get well. And that's Peggy Huppert. And Peggy made a statement that I'll never forget. She said, "You can't help anyone until you first help yourself." And it was a slow slog towards healthiness. I was still fighting alcoholism, and in 2011, I did check myself into the Powell Chemical and Dependency Clinic. I've been alcohol-free and sober since July 21st of that year. And getting sober enabled me to work through my depression with therapy and with other medications. However, I still never found the antidepressant that was both effective for me and did not have side effects that became intolerable. And there are numerous people out there today that have the same problem as they seek treatment for depression. Just a few years ago, even though I have a master's degree, I have numerous IT certifications, and I'm a certified PMI project manager. Just a few years ago, I was afraid that I would never be able to work again, and I began to think about going on disability because I couldn't find the medication that would keep me healthy. But my wife had a better idea. She found out about a new treatment that had worked for people with drug-resistant major depression, and in late 2017, I took a course of transcranial magnetic stimulation, known as TMS, offered here in town, also offered at the University of Iowa. For almost 2 years now, I've been depression-free, and I'm off all antidepressant medications. And this is important because this is the longest period of time since I was 17 that I've been depression-free or been off of medication. Last month, Peggy and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. I've also been married to Peggy longer than I've been married to any other woman, so that's saying something about her. And this wedding anniversary was more meaningful to me in more ways than just the love and dedication that we share. And number one, I'm still alive. You've already heard the stories tonight. Many people have not made it through depression alive, but I'm still alive. I look forward now, number two, to each day, to the journey of life and health that we both share together. I work with an international IT firm as an expertise manager. I lead teams of developers in the United States, in Canada, and in India. The road to health with any mental illness, not just depression, is a long one, contains many ups and downs, many twists and turns, but it is a journey that can have a happy ending. One must have a support group, even if it's a support group of one. That person can be your rock so that you can lean on them in the hard times. One must dedicate themselves to never giving up on the idea that there is hope, and that though there may be days and months and even years of struggle, there are also those periods of light and happiness that are worth living for and striving for. And finally, one must never, ever be ashamed or afraid to ask for help.